for emergencies, you can't prepare yourself while the emergency is happening. So you need to start planning in advance.
So let's start with defining what constitutes an emergency. Can you give some examples of what constitutes a minor disaster or emergency?
For each organization, the definition may differ. In a place like Dubai, which has one unique factor as well, other than the regular risks that you have, like you have the environmental risk, you have the global risk, you have a work environment or an IT one. Here you also have a expat risk.
What's that? What are the first three things that any business needs to have in terms of the emergency plan?
Okay, we start with the...
Okay, hang on. You're jumping.
Each employee has...
How prepared were you during COVID times? Think emergency planning. I bet if you were like the rest of us, you weren't that prepared. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's episode. Emergency planning from an HR perspective. If I were you, I'd grab a notebook to make some notes because we have lots to share in this episode.
Let's get started.
Awesome. I think a good place to start is, when I spoke about it in the intro, when we think emergency planning, everyone thinks the enormity of COVID. But that's not quite it, right? There's lots of different kinds of emergencies. So let's start with defining what constitutes an emergency.
Okay, that's a great place to start because that's often a definition that people don't know how to define for themselves. So emergency is where an unexpected event has occurred, which is causing like a disruption to your regular work in a simple way, right? From a work perspective. And personally, also, it has different meaning.
I was just thinking, how are you going to define this? And then when you said that one line, I'm like, of course, that's very beautifully simplified, and it still sort of hits the enormity of what an emergency is.
Yeah. So how it disrupts, there's a scale. So it could disrupt, like you could have a major disruption like COVID had, made us experience at that time. Or they could be even minor disruptions, which is like maybe low risk. So we kind of have to classify the scale of the emergency as well as the response to the emergency based on the scale.
Yeah.
And oftentimes these dimensions are also not something that people fully understand or appreciate. And either they're fully prepared for a major disaster or, spending a lot of time trying to avoid minor disasters. And that's not the balance that you need when it comes to like response to emergencies as well as planning for emergencies.
Yes. So let's just build on that a little bit, right? Like, can you give some examples of what constitutes a minor disaster or emergency? And then, a major one I think is pretty obvious, but like what's a minor one?
Okay. So for each organization, the definition may differ, So when I say something is minor, it's in context of a certain organization, I would say. Like, say, for instance, if you are a regular business based out of a building in an office, no factory, no manufacturing facility, just working, most of the employees working through workstations, etc. That's the environment you have to visualize, right?
Yeah.
In such an environment, the risks are different to somebody who has a large scale operations with a major, manufacturing facility or a warehouse facility. So the scale and proportions differ. So my risk has to be evaluated based on that. So it's personal is not the word to use, but it is very specific to that organization. So one could be a major, so if you're a company in the same office environment I explained, and you're two people here, sent from overseas, and a disaster happens, then for them, even if it is two people and it's a small office, it's still a major disaster because these people are, pretty much remote in the way they work. So that a minor breakdown might cause a major disruption. But you have to sit down and take the time to quantify, scale, and grade the risk that you have for your business. This is important. Even before you, put any measures in place, is to understand risk in context of your organization. So a minor risk could be like the elevators in your building doesn't work.
Yeah.
that could be a minor risk for a short disruption, but you could have a meeting and a client waiting there, and that feels like it's a major disruption.
What about like a power outage?
So like a power outage. Now in Dubai, we're blessed with no power disruption, but oftentimes it happens when you're, having a business from Dubai, but supporting other regions or other regions reporting into you, there's power outages there from time to time. So that becomes something that may be a routine in there. So they have, ways to mitigate that.
Yeah.
Could be unexpected. Like if it happens in Dubai, it's very unexpected. And we sometimes don't know how to respond. I remember when I first started working on Sheikh Zayed Road, there was an earthquake in Iran, sorry. And the earthquake was major in Iran, but you could feel the tremors
Even Dubai?
in Dubai on Sheikh Zayed Road. So you could feel the ground tremble, and you could see the water. Like it was
Like a movie.
It was really like a movie, and just a very, very normal day. And none of us were expecting this, and we felt it, and everybody panicked. But because I worked in an oil and gas industry, we automatically had protocols in place as to what needs to be done. So, whatever the fear, we knew who the leader was. We took the team down, had a muster sheet.
Okay, hang on. You're jumping you're going way behind.
So what I was trying to explain is, in a normal day, that tremor caused a disruption, although minor, but it set a lot of fear in employees. So for them, it was a major panic mode because they didn't know, they were away from their family. So while it is a minor disruption, it could have a major impact as well. So both needs to be considered when you're in HR.
So going back to what I said was a very simplified definition of what constitutes an emergency. I think now just with those minor examples you've given of major emergencies, I think there's a lot to unpack, right?
Yeah.
So let's start then with what's the first thing that someone has to do when it comes to emergency planning. So step one is identify the industry and identify the nature of emergency, or I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, so those are good starting points. First things, you have to be, for emergencies, you can't prepare yourself while the emergency is happening. So you need to start planning in advance. So that's the first thing, is to schedule time to prepare for such eventualities and how you're going to approach and mitigate and plan for that. So you can respond when an emergency. So those are two different activities. So planning wise, that's the first thing you do. Set a time, work with your leadership team or whoever you need to identify as your core team, which will form like your emergency team, and then set up some protocols in place. And to do that, you need to assess the business risks that you're looking at.
Yeah.
And each organization, like I always say, has different levels of risk, and the risk for somebody might be high, whereas for somebody might be low. And so then we normally provide a checklist to a client which classifies all the kinds of risks that you expect in a place like Dubai, which has one unique factor as well, other than the regular risks that you have. Like you have the environmental risk, you have the global risk, you have a work environment or an IT one. Here you also have a expat risk.
What's that?
So expat risk is something that people don't fully understand, because everywhere else, your workforce is normally constituted of the employees that live and are citizens or nationals of correct location. Dubai and the UAE as general have bulk of their workforce are foreign nationals.
Yeah.
So when an emergency happens, which has a global magnitude, for instance, or even a local scale, there's a different level of duty of care when it comes to your people. And where do you finish? And where does the embassy take over is also not understood well. So these are like what we call as expat risk. So an expat risk could be like their residence caught fire, which happened in the marina recently, right? Now, not many organizations will classify them as a risk, but it is a risk.
But it's in the residence. So what does that have to do with the business?
So let's say that some of the employees were working remotely out of there, or they were working from home. Their laptops, their company equipment was in there, and they had to evacuate that. Is it insured? How is the information there? Were they original? Like there's so many other things. So when you're developing your risk, your work environment, you have to define, is it all office based or is there a hybrid setup? So those kind of things. Now, if somebody who is, okay, not working from home, but it was at work and their house burned down. There is zero possessions, right? They have nothing. They don't have a place to live. They don't have family around them because this is not their home.
But would that constitute as a business risk, or is that still
Because it's a disruption to work, because this person is not able to come to work.
right?
So in a way, it's a low risk perhaps, because you might have somebody else doing the work. This person can go on annually, but it is disruption to a normal business.
Got it. Okay.
So it's awareness of this and how somebody would manage. So this person could have said, look, nothing's wrong with the house, but my building's on fire. I can't go back to the house, you know? And so maybe somebody might need some funds. Like it all depends on your organization
Sure.
culture as well as how you help. But these are also expat risks. Now another one that is where, because we go for holidays or we go home for holidays, right? As expats. But let's say it's monsoons in India, for instance. So if somebody goes to India for their holidays and caught up in the monsoon floods or something, cannot come back
Yeah.
to work. What is that? Is that a risk or is that not a risk?
Is that, or like a global situation
Yeah.
or tension or something like that?
The Philippines, right now, there's typhoon being, alerts have been going out. And if your employees are in Philippines on holidays and the typhoon is going to hit them, what is that going to be?
Yeah.
So it's your business operation risk does not just limit yourself to Dubai. Because of expat nationals, it also extends to their point of origins when somebody is.
But it also could be like your employees are fine, but their family members back home
Exactly.
are
Yeah. So that could disrupt their work as well.
correct.
I remember when the tsunami happened in
Are
Thailand.
you jumping like way forward again?
No.
Okay.
Give me another example, right?
Okay.
When you said family members.
Yeah.
So I remember when the tsunami happened in Asia, like Thailand and India, and all of those areas got affected. We had employees that were on rotation. So suddenly we have some employees in Thailand, some employees in Chennai, and we had to figure out where they all were.
That's scary,
So,
actually.
not only are we absorbing the news that comes through, suddenly we're like,
we have to deal with all
we
of
have
this.
to deal with all
Correct.
this. And some employees were fine, but they lost their homes. Some employees were victims of that tsunami. Some employees lost their family members. So there was a whole crisis that was not company associated, but nevertheless, we had a duty of care to these expat
Yeah.
employees.
I feel very grim just after those first two questions. Like, oh my God.
Maybe we should use something a little. But these are emergencies, right? What I'm sharing is all real scenarios, not something that, is fictitious or from a movie. This is personal experience that I'm speaking.
I hear you. I remember when that happened, I think I was in university. And it was, I think, at the end of December, if I'm not mistaken.
Probably, yeah.
Like 25 years ago?
No. 20 years ago, I will say.
Really?
Like maybe 2005.
Yeah, 20 years ago. You're right. 2005. Correct.
Exactly. So
Or 2004.
something like that,
Yeah.
right? And
But it's still so fresh in your mind.
because it's something that I expect. And very long back, there was a civil unrest in one of the countries that we were supporting, and I had to evacuate people from there. They were expats.
Yeah.
But because they were expats, here's another dimension. They could not go home.
Yeah. Does death of an employee constitute as an emergency?
Yes, because that disrupts business continuity, and the employees level and what plans you have put in place for business continuity will determine the level of risk. There's ways to kind of go about it, but I would say, just to help understand, like anything that impacts business, you have to scale as what is the level of risk. Death of an employee, if it is a very large organization, yes, it is a tragic loss, but from a business continuity, maybe not so much of an impact. But if it's a small team and there's a lot of powers of authority with this person,
true.
or bank accounts or something, then it becomes greater.
Absolutely. I recently came across this business where there was one person who was kind of entrusted with managing a lot of activities for that business. Like you said, he had power of attorney, etc., etc. And after years of trusting this employee, he was almost like a family member. He ended up having to be dismissed because there was a disciplinary issue, and he had to be dismissed. So the impact of that one employee leaving had so many facets of, I don't know what the word is, but like the impact was on so many different aspects of the organization. So yeah, that totally.
So that's a very big business risk, which is a fraud risk. And that fraud could be from like externally or
Internally,
And
true.
how do you mitigate that? So that's where you have authority matrices or checks and balances in place. But when you're a small business or a small setup here from a foreign office, sometimes you not necessarily oversee, but you assess the risk differently because like there is no other option because we have to be, secured within this. This comes to mind when, you're from an overseas, you're setting up a branch here and you deploy your first expat, right? Then this expat is not only there to grow the business, but has responsibility of the bank account, has responsibility of the trade license, has power of attorneys for all of these things. And you're obviously sending somebody that you can trust.
Sure.
But that person might not be like equipped with all the answers or all the information, and that kind of creates stress. So a lot of times expats that we encounter in our consulting practice as well, when there are one or two people, they're extremely stressed because some event that has gone sour is now going to impact every decision that they make. So we have to help, make that, because that was a big risk because it disrupted their life in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, wow. We started on such a positive note, and I just feel the energy of being so grim. But it also kind of tells me that as HR professionals, when you're faced with these issues, people don't realize that we're also humans, but we still have to deal with these situations and guide others through this. So it's really, really important to have these emergency plans on paper so people are not scrambling. You can attend to other people and do what is the right thing to protect the business and also to protect the people.
Yeah, because as HR, right, we have to be responding to the emergency, but also like there's an emotional
impact to us,
to you as a person. So if you don't have systems in place to rely on when this emotional impact, the emotional impact magnifies.
Yeah.
And then you're panicking, you're stressed, you're every emotion that is there. So that's not the well-functioning HR team that you need supporting your business.
Yeah.
So you give them the right tools, set the right protocols. I can give you another example if you're
hold for it. Let's go into solution mode, right? Because I think we've talked enough about different kinds of emergencies, minor, major. You can assess the enormity of it by how it disrupts your business. And there's, a scale almost with least disruption or most disruption, but the bottom line is have a plan. So speaking of have a plan, right? What are the first 3 things that any business needs to have in terms of the emergency plan?
Okay. So 3 things that you could do is obviously start with having the most updated contact list. This is very basic, right? But sometimes you'll be surprised how often that doesn't happen. What does a contact list need to have? You need to have the employees' details. Because you're expat, you need to have their home country details, next of kin, and in case of emergency details. And also one important thing that people often forget is embassy contact details.
Yeah.
Or the foreign office details in case this needs their intervention as well. So this is what I call as a contact list. And my advice to any clients that we work is have that list online, but also offline. And oftentimes that is also something so there should be a separate file with an offline situation. So in case your systems are hacked or there is a disruption where you can't access it, you still have somewhere a paper-based copy to do that, and that should be updated very regularly, and that should carry on. So that's a contact list.
Yeah.
Then you need to have an emergency team, which should be people that have some awareness, some training on how to respond to emergencies. This could be the HR person in there to help with employees and their families, and to liaise with government authorities that have to deal with it. This would have, if you have an HSC person, if you have a regional manager, so this would form your core emergency team. And the second thing the third thing you need to have is a step-by-step process of what will happen. So an emergency is triggered. What is the response?
What's the next steps?
Yeah, exactly. Who's to be called? Who's to be done? It's like a tree. It's a phone tree or something. You know, in schools, in nurseries, they usually have this. If there is somebody that has, what do they call, lice?
Yeah.
So when they have that, then the parents are called to say that this child was there.
Oh,
So
really?
instantly there is like, so it doesn't escalate
I
the
guess
matter.
that would constitute an emergency in a nursery environment.
Nursery environment, right? But there's a phone tree that follows. So one parent, so not one parent is responsible to call all the parents, but there's a trickle down. So they'll say you have these 5 to call and you have these. So they have a tree system.
Like a communication tree.
Communication tree. So all these things are very simple things. If you spend a few hours, you can set these up.
Yeah. What role does HR have to play in this?
So HR, again, size of the organization matters, but let's take a simple, small organization that 90% of the economy in the UAE is, which is your SME community. HR plays a very vital role. So they're the custodians of all the employee data. They are the custodians of pay-related matters, employment-related matters, and they also are the ones that employees tend to approach when they have queries and stuff. So when there was COVID, the morale of the office was something that fell on the shoulders of HR as well. So communication started flowing out from them. So it's good to define, like I mentioned, the emergency team, it's good to define a role of each person in there. So what does HR do? What does the senior member of the organization do? What does HSC do, or the PRO, etc., so that they know each what their responsibilities are.
How do you ensure that this plan that you had, the communication plan, for instance, is like a fail-proof plan, or is that a way to do that?
There is actually. You can do drills. So you do a mock drill to say it's such an emergency, and you test the tree and you test the information that is given, and then you have a debrief session to see where were the breakdowns or where were the gaps. So then you can do a lessons learned sort of session, and then update your response plan.
Similar to the fire drill.
Similar to the fire drill, exactly. So this is where the civil defense comes into play, but it's the same protocol, except you don't have to necessarily run down the building. You can do this on a desktop sort of exercise.
I think another thing also would be to have like multiple backups. So in case, definitely, like you said, online and offline, right? But have, I guess, multiple backups, because you don't know if someone on that emergency team is part of the emergency.
Yeah. And like if the person in the emergency team is impacted, then who is going to be the cover for that person? So that is also important.
Yeah.
But have a control backup so that you know who's got what backup. It's not like everybody keeps a backup, so you don't know which one is the real source either.
How did it work with, clients like ours are international clients that are either expanding to the region or they're present here and they have a very small team.
Yeah.
A lot of times they don't have in-house HR. So how would it work for them?
So often the line managers take the lion's share of HR responsibilities locally, or they have a protocol where they have emergency contact numbers that they can dial into. And then that kind of sets the escalation points from there.
Yeah. When we do these emergency plans for businesses, like walk me through the process so the audience can understand how we do it.
So we start with the understanding of what they currently have as an organization, if there is any, what are the policies, like most organizations would have an HSC policy or some sort of business continuity measures. In the absence of all of that, then we have to start from scratch almost. So we understand what is the level of risk, what do they anticipate as risk, and then we look at their employee data. We have a checklist that we follow or we share with them, and then they review the data that they have. So then they know where the gaps are, and they start collecting that data and building a repository of this information. And then we sit with them, do a couple of workshops to see what structure, systems, and people they have at their disposal to build some of these protocols. So from the time of initiation of the emergency, how would we respond to these processes? So we draft out from the beginning till the end, and a loop to debrief as well.
Okay, interesting. And now you can go back to your example.
So the example that I was talking about, and I think I touched upon it a little bit, was the evacuation and the expat thing. And I talk a lot about expats because this is unique to just UAE, right? You can get emergency information in many different ways. But so this civil unrest caused would have, if they went back to their home country, we would have lost work. So not only would it be an evacuation, but there would also be no work being done. So what we had to do there was to create an alternative location. And so for that, from where the civil unrest was, the alternative location became Dubai. But these people didn't have visas. So we had to go and get visit visas for that. So you see how HR has to be playing and be proactive and think of many different ways, right? So this was what I was trying to say is you need to also not just plans of sending people back to their maybe an alternative location so that there is business continuity in a different way.
How do you balance operational continuity and employee well-being?
Yeah, it's a tough question. And sometimes, you have to have honest conversations with employees and I know what you're going through. We will try and reach out to you, speak to your families, have points of where they can come and share. We used in such situations, what we often did is a check-in with the employees constantly to make sure that they're doing okay and not necessarily make, operational continuity, then we minimize it. What is basic necessary things need to happen for work to continue. So we don't load the employees at that time, or we just ask them do they need time off, do they need a break? So it depends on each employee. Each employee has very different capacity and ways of responding to emergencies. Yes. Some are very calm and are able to take response and be as calm in their work and try and figure out how to do that. Some panic and create more panic. So for them, we would have to ask them to not be at work because they are disrupting even further.
Yeah.
Where in COVID, one of the situations was one employee was tested positive and another employee, without knowing what the protocol was, just sent an email to everybody saying, that's it, nobody come to work for 21 days. And then when we asked, where did you say? So he said, I saw somewhere in the newspaper that you have to have 21 days quarantine. But that was someone else's policy or process or whatever. So that person pulled the alarm for no reason, right? So that also happens. So you have to make sure that you set the tone and tell people how to do things. So it's a lot of different factors to keep in mind to help balance this. There's no one straightforward answer. No?
How do you prepare your managers to lead under stress?
Yeah, this one is also very hard. A lot of this comes to training, because there is no other way. Not everybody, gets this in their MBA degree or becomes a manager necessarily, right? So this is skills that you have to learn, and training is one way to do that. But training can be planned, but emergencies can happen anytime. So they also need to have some sort of additional support from HR to, break down the process, and policies help for such matters because you don't have to think with an emotional mind. You have more objective documents to guide you.
It reminds me when I work in the airlines, right? All of the crew in the event of an emergency, they went through such a rigorous training that they would just default to their training. They knew what commands to say, how to guide people. So they almost had no time for emotion because they had to respond to the emergency in real time, of course. And this is why they went through that rigorous training, because the amount of, the importance of safety, obviously, and their primary role on board was to provide safety, was to look after the passengers or the guests from that perspective. And I think, we can all learn from these different industries in terms of how they prepare for situations like that and adapt it to, an everyday workplace with a smaller team.
Yeah, because when those protocols or the SOPs or the procedures are laid out, it's laid out in an objective way where you can park your emotions in a way and just follow the process without having to apply your mind. It's just following instructions, like how you drive. You look at the
How you drive or how I drive?
let's say how we drive. So that's balanced out. So you follow the traffic signs and you just follow that rather than thinking about, how to behave. If it says 80, you follow that 80, right?
Well, you also have me on the side to say, like, be careful. Be careful.
Watch out.
Okay. On a more serious note, can you think of any other examples where, or what's the hardest emergency situation that you've been part of, and what are your key lessons from that? Because as an HR professional, you're prepared, but there's always something to learn from, something new that happens or unexpected.
So one of the emergencies when somebody, like an emergency where an employee's family, somebody passed away, and this person was somewhere offshore working. So trying to tell this person that this has happened and to do it in a way that, because they're on a very expensive offshore site, we have to be careful what might happen, the destruction there versus something here. So managing that process with sensitivity and understanding and spending, I spent 2 days with this person because that person couldn't fly right away because it's not a place where you have daily flights.
Yeah.
So so I spent a lot of time with this person just trying to, I didn't say much, like as an HR person, I just was there.
Yeah.
So that's sometimes all that you have to do. I remember
one emergency that you attended to, and we won't go into the details, but it did involve the death of an employee and how you dealt with it. I remember his wife, on the anniversary of his death, continued to reach out to you to say, you're in my thoughts, you're in my prayers. Thank you for, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. You're in my thoughts, and thank you for, it's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And thank you for what you did.
Yeah. With 2 employees at the same time we lost, and both of them had children, like young children. And their families were, like, their breadwinner was,
Had passed away.
had passed in a very tragic way. And, trying to work through that process was one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's not also, if that's one thing, dealing with the employee and his or her family, but you have all of the other employees at work that have now come to know about this, right? So it just impacts so much.
I had to go and announce to them about the colleague that they lost. I had to have conversations with them because everybody has to go through the same process to kind of reach home. So this was what, everybody's fear levels got higher.
Yeah.
And we had to make sure that nobody resigned, because these are times when you decide, like, what am I doing here? Is this worth for my family, etc.? So we had to manage that risk that we didn't lose people, because we were undergoing a very critical business operations at that time. So that is also a risk, loss of people in terms of just resignations.
Yeah.
Right? And the family, then there were settlements that had to be done. There were PR issues that we had to manage with that, and not just PR issues in Dubai, which thankfully the PR are not so hard on companies when such events happen. There is enough time to figure out what needs to be done. But we had home country press to manage as well, and there was all sorts of stories that were coming out of there. So that was something so while it was the employee that we were most concerned about, but there was all these other areas that we had to cope. We had a team to support from them, but we were on ground zero, and we had to look after the families, send the employees back home for their funerals. It was a very, very intense day. I had a colleague that was so supportive. The 2 of us, we made it.
Yeah, I remember those days, and that was a long time ago, but it's still fresh in my memory.
I can start from the moment I got the call till the very end. And
we collectively, we almost mourned that loss together, right? Oh, well, okay. On that,
So that is very grim of loss of people. But again, these are situations that do happen. But what helped us, even with all of that emotion, was we had some systems in place. We had procedures in place that elevated some of the stress, not everything.
because you're just following a checklist to say, now I need to do this and this and this and this.
So we at least knew steps. We knew who to go to, what embassy, what this, and so the support was there.
And then emotionally, you can be available to the employee and whoever else needs your attention without having to also figure out like, okay, what do I need to do in addition to being available?
Yeah. And one thing that you have to support this whole process is to have some sort of emergency funds, because money access sometimes it doesn't work in the same way that you can do. So having a pot of money or assigning a pot of money for such an emergency to support some measures or the other is also important.
Yeah.
Which often also people forget.
Okay. Thank you. Any closing thoughts?
We live in a very, very calm, peaceful, and we operate in a place that's, business risks are almost, you can say, non-existent in a way. But we live in a very different environment around us. So we sometimes have to forget that you're in a calm environment and build processes and systems to combat and address and respond to emergencies that are not in your place of operations but around you. So it is very important, and it's a humble request from all businesses to just spend some time to give this some thought, put some notes down. I hope this podcast gave some pointers on how to go approach this and work through this process and have some guidelines in place. It helps a lot.
Right. And if you need help with putting your emergency plan in place, we're here. If you go into the description, you'll find a link. You can book a call with us. We can help you craft an emergency plan for your business, for your industry, and then you can breathe a sigh of relief because now you have this in place and you have us to reach out to whenever you need it. On that note, thank you so much for watching. I just have 3 requests from you. One is to share this episode with someone or a business owner or entrepreneur who you think would benefit from this. Number 2, if you have questions that we can help answer, please pop them in the comments below. And number 3, if there are any other topics or guests that you would like for us to bring on our show, please also let us know, and we would be happy to create more content and episodes that would benefit all of you. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.